Ahlan wa sahlan, tá fáilte roimh go léir. Welcome everybody to the 2021 celebration of Lá le Bríde, St Brigid's Day, convened by the Embassy of Ireland in Jordan. St Brigid was known as the second patron saint of Ireland after St Patrick. And when we celebrate her life in early February of each year, we celebrate not just Ireland's Christian heritage, but also the really important role Irish women played in developing Irish society over many centuries. And it's celebrated in early February at a time when we're moving from cold days to warmer days, to short days to longer days, from darkness to brightness. And I think that's a good metaphor for the darkness we've been in over the last year with COVID-19, because now this day we're also celebrating moving beyond that darkness, because with a vaccine and better treatments there is a way out and there is hope, and we're celebrating that with Lá le Bríde today. This year the theme of our Lá le Bríde celebration is focused on love, on marriage and on relationships. And of course February is a month when we celebrate love and relationships. Today here in Jordan, several Irish citizens are married to people from other cultures, and we're going to celebrate that today. We're going to explore how love and relationship has been reflected in Irish poetry and in song, but also how it is reflected in the cultural backgrounds of people from different cultures. So today we're going to focus on that, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn something from it. I think I want to thank all of you for participating today. I want to thank my colleagues from the Embassy and Bróna for organising the event. And I want to thank all of the people who graciously have made contributions in form of poetry or song or readings today. Gur míle maith go léir. Have a great celebration, and thank you very much.
Fearaim fíorchaoin fáilte roimh gach einne atá éisteacht linn anocht. Tá súil againn go mbainfidh sibh ard-thaitneamh as an gceiliúireadh seo do Lá le Bríde agus teacht an Earraigh. 100,000 welcomes to all of you joining us this evening. We hope that you enjoy the Irish Embassy in Jordan's celebration through spoken word, poetry and song of St Brigid's Day and the coming of spring. In Ireland, we traditionally celebrate St Brigid's Day, the 1st of February, and one of the important quarter dates in Celtic Ireland, as the beginning of spring. And spring is a time we associate with love. Alfred Lord Tennyson wrote, "In the spring a young man's fancy lightly turns to thoughts of love." February the 14th is St Valentine's Day, celebrated worldwide by lovers young and old. Valentine, a man who is, believe it or not, deeply associated with Dublin. So, with a somewhat different take on traditional themes, our leitmotif this evening is love, where we explore the many traditions and customs surrounding love and marriage that were and are practiced in Ireland, Jordan and further afield. Among this evening's participants are members of the Irish community in Amman and a young Jordanian Irish actor-singer RUSLAN TASH. We are also very fortunate in having Mr. Firas Khalifat, founder and general manager of Jordan Heritage. He will tell us of Jordanian marriage and wedding customs and traditions. It only now remains for me to invite you to sit back and enjoy our evening as much as we have enjoyed bringing it together for you.
As you know, February the 14th, St Valentine's Day, is widely recognised as a day for romance and devotion to the beloved. How, we ask ourselves, did this come about? Did you know that St Valentine's patron saint of lovers is a dub? Seriously though, many Irish people know that the remains of St Valentine are to be found in Dublin. However, not so many of us know who he actually was and why we associate his name and feast day with love. Historically, it is possible that there were two martyrs named Valentine and Valentinas, both from Italy, both martyred, reputedly on the same day, the 14th of February, in different years, and both living in the 3rd century. Historians believe that they have been conflated into one person, so that today we celebrate one Valentine. The Catholic Church honoured their martyrdom with the celebration of St. Valentine's Day on the 14th of February. The 14th of February was also a significant date in the ancient Roman calendar. This was a holiday to honour Juno, queen of gods and goddesses. Juno was also goddess of women and marriage. The 15th of February in ancient Rome was Lupercalia, a pagan festival of fertility. In later times, the festival became known as Februara, meaning purifications or purging. From this, we get the name for the month of February. Then, in the 5th century, Pope Gelasius combined St. Valentine's Day with Lupercalia to expel the pagan rituals. Instead of names in a jar, messages of affection, love, and devotion were exchanged. Around the same time, the Normans celebrated Galantine Day, Galantine meaning lover of women. This led to possible confusion with Valentine's Day, as both names sound alike. And indeed Chaucer and later Shakespeare romanticized Valentine's Day in their works. As a result, Valentine's Day became popular and handmade paper cards became the tokens du jour in the Middle Ages. The Industrial Revolution ushered in factory-made cards in the 19th century, and Hallmark cards of Canvas City began mass-producing Valentine cards in 1913, and February the 14th has not been the same since. Now getting back to Dublin St Valentine, however, some of St Valentine's remains are to be found in a reliquary in the Carmelite Church on Angier Street in Dublin. Mind you, some were also to be found in Rome, Madrid, Prague, Poland, Malta, Greece and Scotland, a not unusual occurrence at the time. The remains are in a wooden box within a casket, which has only been opened a couple of times to verify that the contents are intact. So how did this reliquary get to Dublin? In 1836, a renowned Irish Carmelite preacher and worker among the poor in the Liberties of Dublin, Father John Spratt, was given the reliquary with the remains of St Valentine as a token of his esteem by Pope Gregory XVI, following a sermon that Father Spratt had delivered in Rome. And after Father Spratt's death, the remains went into storage. It wasn't until the 1950s that they returned to prominence during renovations of the church. Today, the statue of St Valentine, robed in the red of martyrdom and carrying a crocus, is still visited by couples asking Valentine to watch over them in their lives together. Many come to Mass on the 14th of February, where there is a blessing of the rings of engaged couples. This is what we know of the saint himself, but the following is the legend that tells us how Valentine became to be associated with love. Claudius II was Roman Empire at the time of Valentine. Claudius was both belligerent and anti-Christian. He had great difficulty getting men to join the army. Few wanted to be away from their wives what could be upwards of 2 to 3 years as the Roman Empire expanded. Claudius' solution was to decree that soldiers remain bachelors, and at the same time he made it a crime punishable by death to assist Christians. Legend has it that Valentine transgressed on both counts. He both assisted in marrying soldiers and aided Christians. Valentine was arrested and sentenced to death. While waiting for his sentence to be carried out, his jailer, Asterius, asked for his assistance. The jailer's daughter, Julia, had been blind since birth, and Asterius had heard of Valentine's medical and spiritual healing abilities. He begged Valentine to treat his daughter. Before her treatment was finished, however, Valentine's death sentence was carried out. On the eve of his death, Valentine sent a last note to Julia, wishing her well and exhorting her to stay close to God. Julia received the note after Valentine's death. On opening it, she saw a yellow crocus and was cured of her blindness. She planted an almond tree, today a symbol of abiding love and friendship, near his grave. He had signed his last note to her, "Your Valentine." And this is still the valediction used worldwide by lovers on Valentine's Day.
Let me tell you about Brehon law and marriage. Before English rule, Celtic Ireland had its own system of law that survived until the 17th century. Brehon law developed from customs that were passed orally from one generation to the next. It was written down for the first time in the 7th century. The law was administered by Brehons, the successors of Celtic Druids, and while similar to judges, their role was closer to that of an arbitrator. Men and women could be Brehons. Their task was to interpret and preserve the law. Brehon law was quite progressive for certain classes in society, even by today's standards. It recognised divorce and equal rights. A woman was entitled to alimony. It showed concern for the environment. Certain trees were protected. Restitution rather than punishment was prescribed for wrongdoing. Heavy fines were imposed. So what did Brehon law have to say about marriage? Under Brehon law, 10 different types of marriage were recognised, and all were formal contracts. Marriage relations were very different than today, and the Brehon laws referred to free women only. Often marriages were for political expediency, and under Brehon law, dowries were paid and a man could even buy a wife. For example, the husband-to-be had to pay a bride price of land, cattle, horses, gold or silver to the father of the bride. However, husband and wives retained individual rights to all land, flocks and household goods, each brought to the marriage. A woman also retained strong ties with her family, and the greater her wealth, the greater her independence. Divorce, while it could be initiated by either party, was more easily obtained by a wife than a husband. So a woman could divorce a man for obesity, for being a thief, or for telling tales about their love life. February the 1st, Lá le Bríde, was a significant day for lovers under Brehon law. It was a day a husband and wife could walk away from the marriage. Perhaps a better term to use would be separation rather than divorce. A woman could remarry her husband as many times as she liked. Some of Ireland's more famous couples who married under Brehon law were Queen Maeve of Connacht and her husband Alil. Then there was Bróna Ní Mhuirí. Perhaps the most famous woman who married under Brehon law was another Bróna, 16th century Bróna O'Malley. Her first marriage was to Donal O'Flaherty, Donal the warlike, thus bringing two strong clans together. Bróna brought a substantial dowry to this marriage. Sadly, Donal was killed in an ambush while hunting. Her second marriage was to Richard an Éireann, Iron Richard, a member of another powerful family. However, the course of true love did not run smooth for this marriage either. Bróna had married Richard in the traditional way for a year and a day. Legend has it that she married him to increase her prestige and landholdings. When a year and a day was up, she is reputed to have dissolved this Celtic secular marriage by shutting herself in his castle and shouting out of the window, "Richard Burke, I dismiss thee." This effectively ended the marriage. However, since she was actually in the castle, she kept it. Despite this, they had a son together and maintained a good relationship. Unfortunately, or perhaps not, the more progressive Brehon law was supplanted by the patriarchal system of English common law once colonisation spread. The previous freedoms enjoyed by the married women now began to be severely curtailed.
Down by the Sally Gardens, my love and I did meet. She passed the Sally Gardens with little snow-white feet. She bid me take love easy as the leaves grow on the tree. But I, being young and foolish, with her would not agree. In a field by the river, my love and I did stand, and on my leaning shoulder she laid her snow-white hand. She bid me take life easy as the grass grows on the weirs. But I was young and foolish, and now am full of tears.
Let me tell you about matchmaking in the 18th and 19th centuries in Ireland. In the 100 years prior to the Great Famine of 1848, Irish people married very young. They were expected to take guidance and advice from their parents, and this took the form of matchmaking. The 18th and 19th centuries were the peak of matchmaking in Ireland. Matchmaking was a serious business in an agricultural community. Parity of economic and social circumstances was important. Parents usually did the matchmaking, but the services of a matchmaker were also sought, and these matchmakers were often paid for their efforts. Matchmaking usually took place between Christmas and Women's Little Christmas on the 6th of January. So, to the match itself. Most matchmaking took place at fairs where young boys and girls would assemble. Neighbours would inform young girls to go to the fair as they were wanted for matchmaking. The neighbours and parents of the intended brides and grooms did the matchmaking. Families got together at a room in a hotel or pub where they drank and talked. Whiskey was always part of the matchmaking process. However, the bottle was only produced when the match was agreed. Mostly the couple had the right of refusal in the match, and indeed, many young people already had an understanding before the families got together. Rosary beads, lovers' knots, and lockets of hair were given, and a ring was a definite sign of engagement. Often, however, the young couples did not know one another. A case in point was the match of Peg Sayers, she of Leaving Certificate fame, for those of you old enough to remember her on the syllabus. Peg's match was made at a fair in Dingle by her brother, and she was married on Shrove Tuesday along with many other couples in a multiple wedding ceremony. Peg left her Kerry home for the Great Blasket Island off the west coast of Ireland the evening of her wedding, far from family and friends. As late as 1914, a traveller in Cork reported a Shrove Tuesday multiple wedding. One of the boys was congratulated by an acquaintance. "And where is your intended Joe?" asked a friend. "Begob, Mick, I couldn't tell you," said the unconcerned bridegroom. "But Maggie Dunphy is her name, and she's up there above among the feathers and ribbons." Everyone would quickly learn when a match had been made, and the news would be all over the town. The big day would be arranged and the wedding planned. The girl's friends visited the man's farm to assess the quality of his land and evidence of his husbandry. This was called walking the land. The friends also had to be entertained, as any sign of a lack of hospitality weighed heavily against the success of the match. There was, of course, a dowry that had to be paid. Once the match was decided, the dowry would be agreed. The amount or size of the dowry depended on the extent of the future husband's holdings. The pressure of the dowry cannot be underestimated. If the girl's father was rich, she'd get £3, a cow, and a couple of sheep as a dowry. If the man had a small holding, she'd get a wedding present. When it was time to hand over the dowry, there would be a big gathering on the night of the transfer of what was called the fortune. The man receiving the money was accompanied by 3, 5, 7, or 9 friends. It was believed there was luck in odd numbers. The father counted out the fortune and promised more money and a heifer within the year. Now, the celebrations could take place. The first night of celebrations took place in the bride's house, a week after the match was made. There would be drinking, whiskey, of course, was the popular drink, eating, dancing, and music. There would be plenty of banter and joking that the intended bride was too good for the intended groom, and vice versa. The wedding itself usually took place a week later. Marriage was a desired destination. It meant settled life and a degree of independence. The course of matchmaking did not always run smooth, however. There were always those who were not so lucky. Luan na Bus, Monday of the Puss or the Face, was the Monday before Shrove Tuesday. It was said that girls who had not got a man or a made match at that time had a puss on them. Rural life could be cruel. On Shrove Tuesday, salt was often thrown at girls who had not married before that day to preserve them for the next 12 months. Lún Súile Dia was Monday of Hoping to God. This was the second last Monday of Lent, because although time for a match was slipping away, those not yet matched hoped God would send them a man. Today, we call our matchmakers by different names. Most are online sites promising to find us the perfect partner. Economic and social parity are still a part of the process, however. There are those looking for road frontage, farmers' land, who don't want, however, to surf the information superhighway. Love a HQ was set up 6 years ago in the Irish Midlands by the granddaughter of a matchmaker to help farmers find true love. She organises Farmer Wants a Wife dinners. And in Lisdoonvarna, County Clare, the old ways of matchmaking continue at its matchmaking festival every September. Willie Daly is Ireland's most famous matchmaker. A third-generation matchmaker, he started out almost 50 years ago, following in his father's and grandfather's footsteps. He believes in the old-fashioned method of round-table talks with couples and getting the passion going by getting them to dance together. Although W.B. Yeats might have declared in poetry that romantic Ireland is dead and gone, that will not be the case, while Willie Daly has a part to play in the age-old art of courting. And indeed, who are we to say he's wrong?
Well, now that the match has been made, let's haste to the wedding. 18th and 19th century Ireland customs pertaining to marriage and weddings were many and varied. Before the Great Famine of 1847, young people married at a very early age. In fact, in the 100 years before this, the population in Ireland more than doubled. Weddings were obviously popular events. Before the famine, indeed, neither man nor woman reached full status in the rural community until married. A 21-year-old married girl had greater status than a 50-year-old spinster, and similarly for men. The unmarried were still boys and girls, even into old age. The catastrophic effect of the famine on rural society greatly changed this way of thinking, however. But that's a story for another day. Now, while many marriages were arranged by matchmakers, some were of a different kind. As the old Irish proverb says, Ní lais ar an rá ach pósa. There's no cure for love but marriage. It wasn't unknown for a couple wanting to marry against parental wishes to run away. The young man took the girl to a friend's house and left her there until she was claimed by her parents, who then took her home and made a match. They were then married after a certain period of time elapsed. Now, as the matches took place between Christmas and Women's Little Christmas, Ihe Nollag na Man, weddings took place between that and Shrove Tuesday, Shrove Tuesday being the favourite day of all. However, it was considered unlucky to get married on a Friday, the day our Lord was crucified, a Saturday, the month of May, or the 13th of a month. The following rhyme makes it seem that there were few enough days in the week lucky for a wedding. Monday for health, Tuesday for wealth, Wednesday, the best day of all, Thursday for losses, Friday for crosses, Saturday for no luck at all. If you got married at harvest time, you'd spend your life gathering. St. Patrick's Day, our national holiday, was a popular day to get married. The customs for weddings varied across the country, and they depended on the relative wealth of the areas and individuals getting married. There are two words in Gaelic used to differentiate between the formal marriage ceremony and the merrymaking afterwards. Pósa was the formal ceremony and banish was the merrymaking. The whole townland got ready for a wedding, with everyone invited. It was considered a slight to the couple if at least one person from each household did not attend. In pre-famine times, weddings usually took place in the house in which the couple would live, usually the young man's house or that of his parents. The procession took place from the bride's house to that of the groom. The bride and the other women came on horseback. The father or the eldest brother carried the bride, and this practice continued even after weddings in church became the norm. Upwards of 20 men would ride to the wedding, many with his wife behind him. In Donegal, the groom's neighbours gathered and lit straw sheaves as the wedding passed by, all windows of the village lit by candles, even in daylight. In some areas, shots were fired over the heads of the lucky couple. After the marriage, the groom and his friends would race to the pósa or merrymaking venue. The horses were saddled with a straw saddle for the bride, who rode behind her new husband. Now, this was called the hauling home or the dragging home, and neighbours from ditches fired missiles at them to unseat them. It was considered unlucky to have a white horse or an even number of horses racing. As you can see, the playing of jokes and tricks on the bridal party was common, and it was common in all areas. Before the famine, the priest came to the house to marry the couple. There would be quiet while he performed the ceremony and called for witnesses. That over, the merrymaking commenced. Now, as the priest was the guest of honour at the wedding, and as many weddings took place on the same day, he was often a very busy man. And if he was a known singer or reciter, he was called upon by the musicians to do his party piece. Once the couple were wed, a man had to be the first to wish the bride joy. Stories are told of jealous or spiteful women who did it to bring bad luck. To hear the cuckoo or see 3 magpies on your wedding day was considered very lucky. However, to meet a funeral was considered bad luck, and if there was a funeral on the same day, the wedding party took a different road. Nothing was to cast a shadow. It was a very big day for the townland. A toast often heard at the wedding was Sliocht, slachta sliocht war slachta. May you have children and your children have children. Now, it wasn't until well into the 19th century that church weddings became the norm. The most common day for marrying then became a Sunday. From that time, married women always accompanied the bride and another, the groom, to the church. Everyday clothes were now replaced with feathers and bonnets. Latterly, a statue of the Child of Prague was put outside overnight to ensure fair weather for the big day. It was widespread that, after the ceremony, the bride and groom walked down the aisle and were showered with rice. The first person, bride or groom, to step out of the church would have the most trouble, it was said, during their married life. Who knew? A wedding guest should throw a shoe over the couple's heads for luck as they exited the church, avoiding a direct hit, of course. The banish was held in the man's house, Oíche an Drop, the night of the drop. Music, song, food, drink and games to follow. On arrival at the reception, the couple were met by women with a wedding cake. The cake was placed on the bride's head and cut in two. The wedding cake had a ring, a match, a button, and was made by the next door neighbour. Whoever got the ring would be the first married. The man who got the button would be a bachelor, and if a woman got it, she would be an old maid. The mother of the bride never attended the wedding, as it was considered bad luck for the couple. When the bride entered her mother-in-law's house for the first time after the wedding, the mother-in-law broke a piece of the wedding cake over her head to ensure good relations between them. At the reception, the bride and groom shouldn't ever sing, but they could lead the first dance. And after that, dance followed dance, interspersed with songs and tunes. Now, for the night, the MC was the groom's best friend, and his duties were to make sure that guests were well supplied with food and drink. There was always plenty of drink, but however, signs of drunkenness were considered an insult. Whiskey, wine, milk, and in later times, porter and tea were offered. Those who had taken the pledge never to drink were often heard to say, sure, I have the pledge, but I'll have a half of wine. If there was a large crowd expected, neighbours brought presents of fowl and bacon, bread, cakes and beverages, because any appearance of meanness was a source of shame for everybody. In some areas, the day after the wedding, the bride was handed a man's shirt to make. The night after the wedding was called bottling night, as everybody brought a bottle of whiskey and more merrymaking took place. After that, well, brides in Donegal didn't visit their fathers' houses for a month after getting married because it was considered unlucky to do so. The bride's parents visited her within the month then and brought her bedclothes and a wardrobe. After the month, the couple visited the girl's house and she remained there for a week. A few months later, or indeed up to a year after the wedding, the father brought her a heifer. This was called the culpa spray, the calf's dowry. The Earraigh, the rising out. This was the first outing for the couple after the wedding. And this was usually to the market where further festivities took place. In Galway, it was considered bad luck to go to Mass the first Sunday after marrying. In Donegal, the first Sunday after the wedding was Outgoing Sunday. Everyone stood outside the church door waiting for the wedding party to come out, whereupon more festivities followed. In other areas, the first outing of the couple was to the next fair, where they would meet up with friends for a day of celebration. As you can see, some of these traditions have continued to this day. Putting the Child of Prague statue outside for fair weather. Neighbours saluting the bride on her way to the church, not throwing missiles, however. The father of the bride bringing her to the church. The very best of food and drink for the guests. The best man's duties at the reception. And the couple leading the first dance, to name but a few. Some traditions, well, thank goodness, have not survived. What bride in Ireland today would sew a man's shirt the day after her wedding? Most importantly, the celebration by all of the joyous coming together of a couple has not only survived, but has increased. Now long may that tradition continue.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling, from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the rose is falling. 'Tis you must go and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, o'er all the valleys hushed and white with snow. 'Tis I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so. When winter's come and all the flowers are dying, and I am dead, as dead I well may be, you'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me. But I shall hear, though soft you tread above me, and all my grave will warmer, sweeter be. And you will bend and tell me that you love me, and I shall sleep in peace until you come to me.
Love and weddings are particularly interesting in Jordan. The story begins with poetry. Jordanians are a land of poets. It starts out with 1000 BC, the Safawi inscriptions, and there are a little bit of tweets, let's say, of poetry, up until the form of poetry, the Nabatean poetry, reaching to contemporary poets like Nimr bin Adwan, Arar, and Habib Zyudi. Now, after the man has made and declared his love to the woman and wrote all sorts of beautiful pieces of poetry, the Jaha comes in. Now things need to be made formal, to tie the knot, so to speak. So the tents are erected and the men from either tribe come and gather, and then there's a whole political equation of who speaks and asks the hand of the girl for marriage and who answers. After that is done, there's the very famous cup of coffee. Well, the cup of coffee is a very suspenseful thing. The cup is put and the people asking for the girl's hand in marriage will never drink the cup of coffee symbolically until their request is met. And that's when they can drink, and then the desserts come in, the coffee is drank, and people can leave. From that moment onwards, the phase is particularly vague, like they're engaged but not formally engaged until religiously they actually go to a religious figure or the city hall and they write a piece of paper. But in that particular phase, it used to be traditionally the man or the groom would stay close to the girl's house. So if they live close, he would stay within the street. If they're in a desert or in a semi-nomadic setup, he would erect his tent close to her house just to keep an eye on, sort of competing with the father on who's going to practice the patriarchal nature. Anyhow, but that's completely eradicated now. Now the Sahrat start. Sahra is when you stay up late at night, and that's where either the Dabke or the Sahje and Samir are practiced, depending on which region of Jordan we're talking about. And those go through a rhythm depending on who leads the dance. So at the beginning, it's a very slow rhythm for the older generations and the older men. And then it picks up and the rhythm goes quite high. And that's where the young people go through the late bits of night. Now, on the female side, traditionally, the wahad or all the clothing and the furniture is done by hand, but this is no longer the case. They go to IKEA now. All the other cousins and female friends, they prepare all of that furniture and clothing, and they put on the henna, which is like a temporary tattoo made out of a local herb. Once all of that is done, comes the farde. Farde is sort of an expression or a showing off of power and male extravagance. So all the men ride their horses, now they ride their cars, and they keep honking their horns, and they make themselves noticed at her doorstep. They take the bride, everyone's happy, and then the next day is the Igra. The Igra is a sophisticated catering event. The smallest of tribes will have to at least have a lunch for 200 people, plus minus, and it can go up to 10,000, 15,000 sometimes. So with that, people are happy, they eat. Everyone who is anywhere close to the bride and groom will know that they're in love or they got married. Anyhow, this was Love and Weddings in Jordan. Hope that you've enjoyed it.
Marhaba. Staying in the broader Eastern Mediterranean region, I'd like to look at some of the wedding traditions over on the neighbouring island of Cyprus. Cyprus is a place with very strong credentials in the romantic arena. According to Greek mythology, Cyprus was the birthplace of Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Legend has it that anybody who swims 3 times around the rock where she emerged from the foaming azure blue waters of the Mediterranean Sea is endowed with eternal beauty. To take another example, during Roman times, Mark Antony, ever the romantic, gave the entire island as a gift to Cleopatra of Egypt. Fair to say, setting a reasonably high bar for the rest of us. It's not unsurprising then that throughout the island's rich history, weddings have played a very important role as community social events. As I married in Cyprus myself, I was able to learn a lot about the traditions, and indeed was involved in many. A traditional Orthodox village wedding was a 4-day celebration. Beginning on a Thursday, the bride and groom's families, neighbours and friends would gather in the square to help prepare rezi, the main traditional wedding dish. The villagers would then sit down and relax for a social evening together. It was traditional for a mattress or paploma adorned with crosses, flowers and gifts of money to be laid out to honour the couple. Live music was performed by a violari or violinist and a Cypriot lute player or lutari. In a pre-celebration warm-up ritual, the crowd would then raise the mattress aloft and family and friends would dance around and underneath it. Friday and Saturday was for pre-wedding preparation, which in Cyprus essentially means preparing a beautiful selection of local food. Indeed, this is a festival for any Mediterranean diet fans out there. One of the most famous recipes is gupepkia, rolled and stuffed vine leaves. The original version is made with mincemeat, but vegan-friendly versions are also possible. The grape leaf itself has great nutritional benefits. Low in calories, they are a rich source of essential nutrients. Among other traditional Cypriot foods, guests enjoy goulouri, a ring-shaped cookie or biscuit sprinkled with sesame seeds. The wedding ceremony itself would then normally take place on the Sunday afternoon. The prenuptial gatherings, known as the stolisma, translating as the decoration or the dressing, were and remain absolutely central traditions. A bride's family and friends gather at her home to wish her well. She is usually attended by her kumera, who is usually her best friend. The kapnisma is an important ritual. A silver vessel containing smouldering embers emitting holy smoke is waved around her to guard her against the evil eye. Before leaving her home, a symbolic red scarf is wrapped around her waist and head. Meanwhile, nowadays at a separate location, the groom is in the safe hands, theoretically, of his kombaros, or best man. The main ritual is that his beard is shaven in turns by his groomsmen. It's a very interesting sight, definitely not for the faint-hearted. When the groom is dressed, a red scarf is also wrapped around his waist before departure. An Orthodox church wedding ceremony itself would be quite familiar to an Irish visitor. It's a highly ornate event, full of ritual. An important nuance is that the groom waits alone outside the front door of the church, holding a bouquet. Having been there myself, it's an interesting position to be in, particularly when passing tourists get the cameras going. Be that as it may, the flowers are presented to the bride when she arrives at the church with her parents or guardians to give her away. The wedding party then proceeds up the aisle. In my experience, the groom has comparatively little or indeed no say in the selection of flowers, but the procedural instructions given are very clear. Who was I to argue with tradition? Another central feature is the wearing of ornate circular crowns or stefana, which are affixed by the cumera and combaros respectively. The crowns are connected by ribbon, symbolizing the new union. To confirm the couple's engagement, rings are blessed and exchanged, by custom then placed on the fourth finger of each other's right hand. During the ceremony, the priest gives the couple brosfora, a ceremonial bread to eat, and gomandaria, the famous Cypriot red wine, to drink. This symbolizes the wedding at Cana in Galilee, where Christ blessed the marriage and converted water into wine. Towards the end, the bridal party joins hands with the priest and completes 3 circuits of the altar, the dance of Isaiah. This partly symbolizes their future, infinite journey together. Finally, the couple are blessed and pass back down the aisle. Outside, they are greeted by a shower of rice thrown by their guests to wish them a life of happiness, prosperity, and many children. After the church service itself, another more light-hearted custom takes place. An odd number of sugared almonds are placed in a silver bowl with tiny red ribbons. These are offered to young, non-married guests, both male and female. Traditionally, they would eat the sugared almond and place the red ribbons under their pillows that night. Folklore suggests that their future spouse would then appear in their dreams. The festivities continue at a nearby hotel. Emphasizing the community spirit, the wedding party lines up and greets what could be several hundred or more neighbours, work colleagues, school friends, etc., who join the celebrations to convey their best wishes. After the large reception, a smaller core group of family and friends gather again for a banquet dinner, cooked using wonderful local fresh produce. Early on, the bride's unmarried friends are invited to write their names on the soles of her shoes. At the end of the evening, the bride removes her shoes. By tradition, the women whose names don't appear on the shoes will be the next ones to marry. Dancing then commences and the couple perform a newlywed dance. Younger people in particular are usually very keen to show off their prowess on the dance floor, and in an enduring tradition, the night concludes with Greek-style dancing. Finally, to round off a very special series of events, the following day is known as the antigamo. Both sets of parents, guardians, or guardians prepare another banquet for close family and friends. The food consists mainly of barbecued meats, known locally as súiles, along with fruit and vegetables produced from their own land. So there you have it, Cyprus weddings. Overall, Cyprus is a very special place where you're guaranteed a warm welcome and, importantly, if you're Irish, beautiful sunshine. Slán go fóill, ma salame.
When Ireland was Christianised in the 5th century, the mantle of the Celtic goddess Brigid, whose cult was celebrated on February the 1st, passed to early Christian Ireland St Brigid. The Goddess Brigid festival was Christianised then to become St Brigid's Day. St Brigid founded, among many others, a monastery in Kildare. She is known as Mhuirí, Our Lady of the Irish, and is one of Ireland's patron saints. A strong woman, named after the goddess Brigid, She defied her pagan background to become a strong advocate for Christianity. Like her namesake, who was the goddess of song, craftsmanship and poetry, St Brigid founded a school of art and is the patron saint of poetry. The St Brigid's cross is one of the most archetypal symbols of Ireland today. Now, while it is considered a Christian symbol, it may well have its roots in the pre-Christian goddess Brigid. Woven from rushes with a square centre and 4 radials tied at the ends, it was traditionally hung on kitchen walls to protect the house from fire and evil. Brigid's crosses can still be found in many Irish homes, especially in rural areas. Let me now read a short poem about St Brigid's Day by Irish poet and Nobel laureate Seamus Heaney. From Crossings by Seamus Heaney. On St Brigid's Day, the new life could be entered by going through her girdle of straw rope. The proper way for men was right leg first, then right arm and right shoulder, head, then left, shoulder, arm and leg. Women drew it down over the body and stepped out of it. The open they came into by these moves stood opener. Hoops came off the world. They could feel the February air, still, soft above their heads, and imagine the limp rope fray and flare like wind-borne leanings, or an unhindered goldfinch over ploughland.
We would like to finish our spring celebration with a traditional Irish wedding blessing. It was originally written in the Irish language and the author is unknown. The images it invokes of rain, sun, and wind highlight ancient Ireland's deep connection to and appreciation of nature. May the rain always fall soft upon your fields. May the sun pour down like honey where you stand. May the wind be always at your back. May the road rise to meet you. May God hold you in the palm of his hand.
So we've come to the end of 40 minutes or so of poetry, of story and of song. I think St Brigid herself would be very pleased with our presentation today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something from it. I want to thank my colleagues at the Embassy, Bróna, who've been responsible for putting this production together, and of course Rajiv and Arthur, who've really helped us get the production finalised. I want to say to you that we'll be in touch over coming weeks in the run-up to St Patrick's Day, and we have a few more events planned around that time. It's likely they'll be virtual. I think everything is virtual at the moment, and we look forward to a time when we'll be able to meet in person. But we promise you we will be doing more similar events over coming months. Thank you so much.